what is Dash? So Dash is a platform for building data apps, mainly in Python. However, they do offer it in R, Julia, and F Sharp if you prefer those languages. It's essentially a way to create a fully fledged web app to display data in an interactive way, but it's a very low code way of doing that, so you don't have to build everything from the ground up. You sort of build on top of the package that they already have. So if you wanted to build a web app, you could do it solely in Python. You don't need to know any JavaScript to make it interactive. You can just write everything in Python, and there's ways that the package allows you to manipulate that data to display it in different ways. You kind of need to know a little bit of JavaScript, but it's kind of done in a Pythonic way. It's kind of interesting, but it's a lot easier than doing something from scratch. And then you can deploy that web app through a service such as OnRender. I'll show you one that I've made in just a moment, from knowing nothing to doing it in a very short period of time. And I only know Python really. I know a little bit of HTML, but not a lot. So here's the main site. They do have enterprise version, so that's a paid version with some sort of tools that allow you to make things quicker, easier, but that is a paid service. I don't know much about that. Only thing I'm familiar with is the open source software. If you've ever used, let's say, Plotly Graphs, then you're familiar with Plotly in some realm. However, this is specifically with Dash, and they have a whole open source library, so you can always go here. And they have tons of documentation down the side here. And unlike most documentation for a lot of products, this is actually very good. It's very easy to follow. Although it doesn't have every single scenario that you might come across, it has most of them. So with callbacks, there's tons of different things here to explain callbacks. These are all interactive tutorials here as well. They're very good. And then you even have the whole open source components library, which is huge. So like I said, you don't need to know HTML, but there is a HTML component library here that you can sort of learn from. It's very straightforward. And of course there is the enterprise component library. So there's the engine, there's different kits. I'm not personally familiar with this. If you're interested, you can always demo it or buy it. Prices vary. I think you have to contact them directly to find out about pricing. But I thought it would be interesting to go to the galleries here. And if you go to the gallery, it will show you sort of applications that have been built, some with the enterprise and some just using the open source library. So there's lots of different things here showing graphs in different manners. There's also ways to manipulate 3D objects. Tons of different things. So I'll leave a link to this, the Dash Gallery portal, in the description. So if you want to look through that and maybe find something that's good for inspiration, or if you don't know how to do certain things, a lot of the time you can find these on GitHub. So if you just Google the name of the demo, you can find it on GitHub and you can dissect the code yourself. So here's one. This is the self-driving, and as you can see, it's all, you can manipulate things. So I could zoom into this part if I wanted to. I can click next frame, so it'll skip along. There's different thresholds. All of this is interactive, but it will work real time. And then there's another one, so a manufacturing dashboard. So we see the operator ID, time to completion, different parameters. As we hover over the highlight changes, you can again zoom in on different graphs. Hover over and you'll get some data. So this does use JavaScript, but you don't have to actually write the JavaScript yourself. Everything's contained within the Dash library package. Brain surface, so this is what I was talking about, where you can rotate 3D objects. And again, see, so we can see here, we can view this on GitHub. So if we wanted to, we can go to the GitHub and we can check all of the information here. They give you again how to install things, the whole rundown. So here's one for oil and gas. This one's very interesting. It's a nice dashboard. Has maps that are interactive. It shows points. Donut charts. And then I'll show you one that I've created. So this is for a game, Forge Lions Forever, Supreme Commander. And there wasn't a fantastic dashboard that was available. There was some stats you could see in the game client, but it is a community driven project at the moment because the original developer doesn't exist anymore. So I created a little dashboard that would allow you to check your score, check your stats for your player. So here we can see a player, there's their global rating, their past names, faction, played frequency, and you can hover over here so you can see they played Cybran 3,737 times, which is 87.5%. But if we wanted to see, let's say, what faction they'd played other than Cybran, we could just click on that, which would then remove them from the donut chart, and then it'll show us what the remaining time is, the remaining faction played are. So 45% of the time it was UEF, that's 245 times. We can look at their global rating over time, so we could say, oh, I wonder what their rating was in April 2021. And we can see there it's 1,661. Again, let's say there's a lot of detail happening here. If we wanted to zoom in, we can simply just drag over and zoom into that data there. We can have a much better look. And let's say we liked what we saw here, we can always save this plot as a PNG. So you just click on there, and then it'll save it, downloads it, and I can open that new plot there. And here we go, that's just going to quickly save it for you. So we can see their rating change over time, their win-loss ratio. So we can see how many, not just that obviously the green's the win, but how many number of games have they won. So it's 1,742 in this example. And it's fully interactive, so I can put another name in, let's say Guile. Just type that in, press enter. You could have a search button there, but I prefer it this way. So we can see he's had no past names. He's got a global rating of 490. And we can see the different sort of factions he's played and the statistics around that. It's all interactive. I wrote this myself. I don't know any JavaScript at all. And I was able to create this. I think it looks relatively nice. It works quite well. I've put it on, as we can see here, the URL is FAF dashboard and onRender. So I'll show in the future how to sort of deploy these applications to onRender. It's completely free. That's why when I'm changing names, so if we go back to ISE, it's not the quickest. Of course, this behind the scenes, there's an API call, so it's limited by the speed of the API, but also it's a free service, so don't expect it to be lightning quick. But I think it's quick enough, and for free, you can't really complain. So that's basically what Dash is all about. So here's the application that I just showed you, the FAF dashboard. It's not a very large application for what you see there. It's only, let's have a look here, 230 lines of code. And that's not being used in the most efficient way. I'm not saying my code is particularly good, but it gets the job done. So we can see if you've got any experience with Flask, you'll notice that this sort of app would normally equal Flask, and then you'll have different sort of style sheets, etc., and the app layout. So it looks very similar to that of a Flask app because it is based on Flask. And if we go down to the bottom, we can see it does end with a if name main app run server. And in here, I've just got a simple Python program. It uses app callbacks, so this is a little bit tricky if you're coming from Python because I didn't understand this at first, but there is a good tutorial in the documentation that does explain this. It's not perfect, so I might make a video on a couple of the areas that I was stuck on, but it's very useful nonetheless. So I definitely recommend reading through the documentation because there's so much there that any problem you have, it's probably explained, or there'll be a very similar situation inside the documentation. So that's a quick overview of what Flask is and what it has to offer. It's essentially just a sort of way to develop web apps that are interactive and a good way to manipulate data.